Hey guys, it's C.S. Joseph with csjoseph.life doing an episode for this, the first episode of season 18, Introduction to Cognitive Mechanics. And this is going to be probably the most important season that I do. I mean, other than obviously the book that we're getting written out, and it's going to be like a manual and whatnot. We'll have it available this year after the personality assessment releases online, which will go into detail about cognitive mechanics. But this particular season is going to be, let's say, I think a deeper dive. We're going to be taking content from seasons 5, season 16, as well as season 1, and going a level even deeper than that, and showing you exactly how the human brain, through neural pathways, is able to grow via cognitive transition, and looking at positive and negative charges attached to pessimistic and optimistic functions and the like. There's just so many different things and topics to discuss within season 18. Cognitive orbit, which we haven't really discussed very much. We'll be talking about cognitive orbit. We're also going to be talking about obviously the functions. Going to be touching a lot more on cognitive axis as well, and just maybe I think a little bit of an approach from John Beebe as well. We're going to be looking at some direct material out of energies and patterns of psychological type to that end. And we're also going to be slightly discussing gender and gender roles taken on by the four sides of the mind at various different levels. So it's just a lot. It's just a lot of things, and I maintain it's really important that people watch this particular season, because I think it will just start to show just how complicated we are as human beings. We are extremely complicated. And the human mind and the human soul, as complicated as it is, and how it grows, and how it manifests, how it develops over time, ultimately reaching the end goal of cognitive integration and the like, all of that will be super important. Why is it important? It's important because most people they just take the assessment and then okay, here's my type. Even though most online assessments, all online assessments except mine, by the way, they're 1 out of 5 accurate. My test, I can boast that it is capable of delivering 100% accurate answer, provided the user is putting in 100% accurate input. And I guess that's probably the same challenge that all the other online tests have. The difference is that the assessment that we've put together will actually teach the user while they're taking it, so that there's multiple opportunities for verification, and they won't get lost along the way, and then they'll just be able to simply answer their questions. So yeah, it will definitely be a test unlike anything that's out there currently, and I'm very happy. I'm very happy with it and whatnot. But yeah, great. Someone's typed themselves. They know their type. Yippee skippy, but. But what about where do they go from there? Well, season 18 exists to kind of help answer that question, because this is so much more than the MBTI letter dichotomies. This is so much more than Dr. Linda Barron's. This is so much more than David Kiersey. This is so much more than Dr. John Beebe. It's so much more than Dario Nardi. It's so much more than Mark Hunziker, Stephen Montgomery, and then going all the way back to Plato and Pythagoras. It's so much more. We've been able to develop the science in such a way where we've been able to unlock additional secrets about the mind, and come to a higher level of understanding. So And, when it comes to season 18, if you don't understand just how complicated we are, then you're liable to start thinking like, oh, you're just putting people in boxes. And it's like, no, I am not actually putting people in boxes. Let's be straight. I am definitely not putting anyone in boxes. It's too complicated for that. When someone tells me like, oh, you just type me, you put me in a box, and I'm like, well, okay, technically I've put you into 4 boxes with 4 sub boxes each, so 16 sub boxes. But then we have to look at your cognitive development, and is the parent functions developed of all 4 sides of your mind? Are they? Do you know that? And that can put you in additional boxes. So then my question to them is, okay, what's your actual box? What box are you actually a part of? Because it gets so much more complicated than that. Now, luckily, the type grid, as we've mostly fleshed out, the type grid, which represents this multi-layered, multi-dimensional abacus, basically, that we use to measure or identify the human soul with, one's persona with. The type grid is pretty well fleshed out. I mean, we've used multiple vectors for using this abacus, and there's so many. I mean, I generally use probably about 8 or 9 different vectors with the type grid itself, but it goes a lot further than that. I mean, I've probably identified about 150, and then using logic, it's like, okay, there's actually way more than this, and to the point where now I'm starting to realize there's probably about unlimited different ways or methodologies that can be discovered in using the type grid to verify, somebody's, mind. And an example of that would be the Riemann dichotomies. I don't know if you guys have checked out the Riemann dichotomies, which will be another subject of cognitive mechanics that we'll be discussing. So Riemann dichotomies are another way that you could interpret the type grid, right? And we're going to be talking about that in this season. And it's basically like a different form of cognitive function pairing, etc., or cognitive function comparing. We're going to be, like, hey, oh look, there's an apple, but he's an orange, so for example. And based on that, we'll get to a point where it's like, okay, hey, we're able to further identify additional types together and group them up specifically according to the type grid if you actually have that knowledge. So that way you're not just using, communication style, aka interaction style, or disposition, aka temperaments, only to determine, your psychological type. It's going, way deeper than that. Obviously, we talk about quadras, cognitive axis. Then we're going to be talking about cognitive orbit. But then when you introduce the Riemann dichotomies, there's just so many different ways to keep track. There's so many different ways to verify your type now with the type grid, and it's absolutely fantastic. It's really great to know that you have these multiple layers of verification with the grid itself, so that you always know for a fact that regardless of however which way you interact with the type grid, you always know for a fact that your type is your type. And we all know how hard it is for an individual to type themselves, and usually you need someone on the outside. Now, we're hoping the assessment, takes over that point, and it's like, hey, okay, yeah, the assessment is basically representing that third party that a person can use to be assessed. But I mean, that's why assessments exist. That's why typists exist, or typologists, I guess, as someone would say. I wouldn't call them a typist. Let's be honest, I think that's a very simple way of referring to someone who types other people professionally and whatnot. But ultimately, it's like, okay, I need to be able to do it myself, and that's what we're trying to do here in the CSJ community, is increase the accessibility within the science. And I'll admit, we've had some of our issues with our existing type grid that made it difficult for people to understand, but we are making huge improvements to very soon with Ultimate Messaging Formula. So we'll have that. It'll be a completely new type grid along with a whole bunch of other pages and resources to go along with it. Probably about 5 or 6 different pages. So I'm looking forward to having that. Oh yeah, I love that lens glare. Never not have glare, right? Always have the glare. So anyway, but in order to have full-on interpretation of what the type grid does for somebody, or in order for someone to fully interpret their own persona, we have to talk about cognitive mechanics, and that's basically my point. Without cognitive mechanics, then we're just reduced to like this box, and then I end up having my ESTP cousin in my face complaining to me about being put into a box because he's choosing, and then deciding to willfully not care or remotely think about what it is I'm trying to tell him, because it's either too new to him or he just can't, he just takes it as, oh, you're taking away my choice, and I'm like, no, I'm not taking away your choice. Actually, I'm trying to give you more freedom of choice. I'm trying to get you to realize that there's nothing wrong with you, and people keep taking away your choices, but then you assume something's wrong with you because the affiliative people out there have told you this, and that's why for some reason you think you have to be on Adderall to get through your day, when the reality of the situation is not that. That's not reality. But who am I to argue with a professional, right? I'm sorry guys, but the whole idea of someone being a professional or someone credentialed is entirely subjective. It's absolutely subjective and has no basis on truth whatsoever. The title of expert itself is insanely subjective. And when people make rules and laws based on arbitrary experts, those rules and laws too will also be arbitrary. So stop allowing society to degrade like this. So that's why we're going to be talking about cognitive mechanics, to make sure that the science itself is not degrading while in the hands of the community. Because it's like, yeah, guys, people are just going to mishandle it. They're going to create these arbitrary rules based off of, their ignorance, when I'm going to try to flesh it out entirely. We'll be talking about all these different points of view and how to interpret each little piece on how the human mind works, and we're going to go from there. We're even going to be talking about neural pathways and neural pathway development, how that comes as a result of I'm really going to make a rubber exit here. But yeah, I mean, like, cognitive development, has a lot to do, like, physically with neural pathway development. And we've been talking about, like, a lot of metaphysical concepts here on this channel or on this podcast. But there's a lot of physical components that go along with it. And I think for the first time we're going to be discussing the physical as well, because cognitive transition, either chaotic or orderly transitions, I might actually even demonstrate the water demonstration, so people can see like a physical example of what I'm talking about for cognitive transition and how it works, and how that impacts neural pathways with the brain will be a very interesting perspective to share. So based on that, I hope the community is further armed with a fully operational battle station, aka 4 sides of the mind, to be able to psychoanalyze themselves and other people, but ultimately they'll be able to reach a higher level of understanding instead of just like, oh, well, these are your stereotypical behaviors, get over it. And I think that's the main point my ESTP cousin is trying to make. He doesn't want to be reduced to a stereotype, and I think that's what everyone in general is kind of afraid of when it comes to this science or psychology itself, or Jungian analytical psychology. It's because they don't want to be stereotyped, right? And while stereotypes exist, and there's a lot of reasons why they exist, we need to get the science away from stereotypes and get it more to like actual concrete facts, and then people like my ESTP cousin will actually like accept it for what it is, the truth. So anyway, I think that just covers my introduction for season 18. I look forward to having you all joining us for season 18. Gonna have some crazy whiteboards. I think I'm actually gonna have a blackboard this time. I'm waiting on a blackboard. I'm using some chalk. The reason why is because the whiteboard sucks because it has so much glare on it, and the lighting in the studio is just terrible. So that's why I went to the green screen, but I don't always want to use the green screen. I really want to make use of my other cameras, and not having a green screen all the time is kind of it's one of my preferences, quite frankly. So that's what I'm hoping to accomplish, but we'll see. Railgun's still making the blackboard for me to use, so I can use like chalk and not have any glare off of my board, so I can explain appropriately. So hopefully it works. I think I also need to get an eraser for it as well. So anyway, folks, thanks for watching and listening, and I'll see you guys tonight.